This is Marc Mullinax. Welcome back to our class on Taoism, a course that courses through the paths of each of the 81 verses of Tao Te Ching, episode by episode. Today's verse is 54, Roots and Fruits.
When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. The sweet sound of the river as she moves over the stones. The same song that the blood in your body sings as it weaves around your bones. When you're listening, are you listening?
You are already like a tree, rooted deep beside flowing, cool streams of water that never run dry. You don't get concerned when it gets hot because your roots are deep and your leaves stay green. Even when there's no rain, you do not worry, and you just cultivate your fruit. Your fruit ripens always on time. Your leaves never diminish or curl in the summer sun. No matter what, you thrive, for you are deeply rooted. Psalm 1 and Jeremiah 17. Now to this wonderful verse 54. It's a verse about cultivation. Got lots of gardening metaphors. Cultivation of what's already planted deep within, which is Tao. Thoughtful people like you who guard their life don't just cultivate their life per se, but what organizes and runs life itself. And what does control life? Nature. And what is nature? Nature is Tao made visible. This is a verse full of roots and fruits comparison. And most wonderfully for me, when we understand what we're rooted in, this affects the fruits we produce. So here is verse 54 from my translation. Verse 54, Roots. Nothing you plant with deep roots can be shaken loose. These pass to your descendants, who will no doubt honor you for it. Rooting Tao within yourself produces genuine virtue. Rooting Tao within your family multiplies virtue. Rooting Tao within your community makes for enduring virtue. Rooting Tao within your nation produces prospering virtue. Rooting Tao throughout your world expands virtue everywhere. Regard yourself through others. Regard your household through other families. Regard your village through other communities. Regard your country through other nations. Regard all that lies below heaven through everything. How does one know all below heaven? Stay rooted. Here is one of those times where we can read a verse through both social and personal lenses, maybe with one eye on the social and the other on the personal, making for true stereoscopic depth of field vision. The social becomes background to the personal. The personal is a backdrop for the social, or as my radical colleagues at Union Seminary in New York City put it, the political is personal, and the personal is political. You know, Tao is often described as mysterious, which is true, and in ways that are just beyond language. Today's verse is one in which Lao Tzu offers us a vision of how Tao works in poetic images that we can understand. So it will help to get in touch with your poetic nature for this verse. This verse works two very interrelated phases of Tao cultivation. One, rooting, and then two, observing. Phase 1 is rooting. Phase 2 is regarding or observing. Read the first phase as the invitation it is, which goes like this. Please cultivate that in which you're already deeply rooted, that is, Tao, seeing Tao in everything. The second phase is the regarding of everything through these roots in Tao, or seeing everything through the Tao roots lens you are ever polishing. One process, two phases, rooting, regarding, cultivation, seeing. After a while, you don't need to know which is which because they merge into one vision and experience. The venture into space is meaningless unless it coincides with a certain interior expansion, an ever-growing universe within that corresponds with the far flight of the galaxies our telescopes follow from without. Now that inward world can be more volatile and mobile, more terrible and impoverished, yet withal more ennobling in its self-consciousness than the universe that gave it birth. Lauren Isley. Our first phase, cultivation, repeatedly uses the word shu, H-S-I-U, meaning cultivation. Yes, but also a word cloud of other meanings, like nursing, discipline within, conducting oneself well, studying, mastering, building, or constructing. In my translation, I used the English rooting and rooted for these related words I just mentioned. Here, the gardening metaphors are obvious. That said, though, are we not already rooted in Tao? Yes. And is this being rooted part of our day-to-day awareness? Our shu, our cultivation of that intelligence into our moment-to-moment consciousness, is what this verse teaches us to do. Let me digress for one moment. This podcast is dedicated to the pedagogy that we are already freed, already in Tao, and we have no presets. That is, we are rooted in Tao's radical freedom from society's habits and thinkings. You know, all those fixations, triggers, habits, whether inherited or not, and those societal and personal myths that we sometimes get immersed in. But it gets better, this freedom. We are rooted in Tao's radical freedom for following Tao's original blueprints and instructions for all life and all that is. Once we accept this condition of freedom at our very roots, Taoism gradually teaches us over a lifetime or many lifetimes that we are born free from all presets, freed for the life and existence of radical service to all. We do not have to live as pale cartoons of others' designs. So we are known by and found in our natural roots in Tao's story and none other. This is the message of the first phase of this verse. So listen again to how Lao Tzu works out this first phase's power for peace, where shu begins a fugue of 5 declarations. Rooting shu, Tao, within yourself produces genuine virtue, or de. Rooting shu, Tao, within your family multiplies that de virtue. Rooting shu, Tao, within your community makes for enduring de, or virtue. Rooting shu, Tao, within your nation produces prospering virtue. Rooting shu, Tao, throughout your world expands virtue, or de, everywhere.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
The second phase is captured in the word Quan, K-U-A-N. Again, Quan is repeated several times, and again, Lao Tzu places this word intentionally to begin 5 sentences in a row. Quan means to watch or observe, as from a high place, like a watchtower, platform, or even a temple. Quan's word cloud of meanings includes these ideas. To watch, read, like a room, or read a person, or read a situation. And the word I use is regard. But get this, in Taoism, Quan often means a temple, the sacred place where one practices this observation. So wherever you practice Tao is your sacred place. Phase 2 of this verse uses te, or virtue, as in Tao te Ching, 5 times. Lao Tzu sets up this fugue of 5 reverberating assertions regarding Quan yourself through others, Quan your family through families, Quan your village through other communities, Quan your country through other nations, and Quan heaven through everything under heaven. This is te, this is power, this is Tao's virtue. So, zip up these 2 phases together and see these 2 phases as a single one process. A breathing in and breathing out, a yin and a yang, as natural as one foot put forward to walk and then the other foot forward. This verse describes 2 moments or movements that follow one from the other, but we can regard them as a single, combined, integrated experience. And here's the cool part. We've seen how Tao and Te, or the way and its power, are two processes that yield creation in one flowing moment. Tao is the blueprints. Te brings these blueprints into reality. Tao is the dream. Te is the fulfillment of Tao's dream into deeds. So in your very person, you unite Tao with Te. And once you cultivate your rooted awareness of Tao, then you may regard yourself through others. You may regard your household through other families. You may regard your village through other communities. You have the freedom to regard your country through other nations. Again, you can have this freedom to regard all that lies below heaven through the lens of Tao and everything. Hello, Golden Rule. Tao is like a lens, but a trustworthy lens, grounded by the roots of who we are, so that we may have the confidence and courage to get out of our own ways of being unfreed and into Tao's way of freedom. This all reminds me of my fave verse 25. Know your interconnections. Human beings come from Earth. Earth's patterns entwine with heaven's. Heaven roots in Tao, and Tao's blueprint is nature itself. So in the context of phase 2, or this regard phase of verse 54, when we regard all you are and belong to through others, you bring your inner sense of being rooted in Tao into the social world. The hidden affects the seen. We regard what we see through the lens of our roots in Tao, and it all makes a kind of wonderful interconnected sense. A sense in which everything we can Quan observe runs by its deeply rooted original instructions. And our verse's last line confirms this. How does one know all below heaven? Stay rooted. I'm going to let you figure out how to stay rooted. Just know that you are already rooted in the original instructions. That is phase 1. And to practice one's rootedness is to regard everything Quan, or phase 2, as a unity of the regarder and what is regarded. This is how we stay rooted. Verse 26 gives us a great one-line commentary here. Balance lies deep. Lose your roots and you lose your footing. This is our invitation to deepen the connective roots we already have, where we already are, for Tao goes deeper before it goes wider. All is taprooted into Tao, the common water table of creation and humanity's resources that are right under our feet. It's all here. No passport can bring it closer. Tao is at work everywhere, and that even before you and I arrived. To practice both phases of this verse as a single process mean that we are just pressing the play button on the original instructions of the universe and our small part of it. We join Tao, or the instructions, with Te, the implementation of these instructions. And this is how peace and its power spread. Just like you practice reading, music, a sport, your practice grows simultaneously deeper and wider. Notice how Tao's proliferation into the visible expands its invisible roots. This expansion goes from the small to the universal, from an embodied activity in one's person to its deep hold everywhere. This is how Tao is made known in the world through the practice of its virtue. Our balance lies deep. Lose your roots and you lose your footing. Finally, see the crucial inner architecture of how phase 1 and phase 2 interrelate. Ladder upon ladder, stair upon stair. Tao is like the ladder or the stair, but virtue is you climbing them. Soon the climber and the stair disappear, and there's only the ascension. It's like our already used oxygen on a plane metaphor. First, perfect yourself with what you are, an oxygen breather. So breathe the oxygen you already have, and then, and only then, reach out to others. Well, which is more important, Mark? Bad question. For these are the same processes. They are indivisible, breathing in, then reaching out. Following a Tao is the freedom to practice the golden rule. So practice your Tao roots, and even later generations receive noble, pure, kindly Tao. And thus, in your practicing of your roots, blessings reach your descendants, virtue grows, beauty lasts, and a kind of pure worship never ends. What we plant right is virtue. What we hold right is oneness. When virtue flourishes, distant generations give praise. Want an shi. Notice in the following quote by Ho Shang-kung how the personal and the social ever interconnect. We cultivate the Tao in ourselves by cherishing our breath and by nourishing our spirit, and thus by prolonging our life. We cultivate the Tao in our family by being loving as a parent, filial as a child, kind as an elder, obedient as the younger, as chaste and dependable as a husband and wife. We cultivate Tao in our village by honoring the aged and caring for the young, by teaching the benighted and instructing the perverse. We cultivate the Tao in our state by being honest as an official and loyal as an aide. We cultivate the Tao in the world by letting things change without giving orders. Lao Tzu asks how we know that those who cultivate the Tao prosper and those who ignore the Tao perish. We know by comparing those who don't cultivate the Tao with those who do. Your rootage in Tao is your lens, the way or Tao through which you regard yourself, your household, your village or tribe, your nation, and everything that you'll ever know is to practice being rooted. Our roots are our lenses. So homework. In today's verse is this golden rule. See yourself as everything, and everything as yourself. If you do, then whom can you harm? However you phrase it, renew your practice of the golden rule, seeing that in your doing, you are done by, and in your withholding of doing, you are also affected. But this golden rule begins with someone freed up by their practicing their roots in Tao. And then they're freed up to serve others without their small sense of self or their unrooted sense of self getting in the way. Meditate on this. It's time for Floyd's question. And again, my sincerest apologies to him and to you for your not being able to enjoy his unique voice. But here's his question. In the notes and reflections for this verse in your translation, you assert that section 4 of the verse, quote, advances and deepens our understanding of the golden rule, unquote. Would you please elaborate and clarify how this works? Nice, Floyd. Thank you for providing us with a chance to review or view again how the golden rule is not just some nice little verse we learned as kids, but rather is one of the most powerful forces for peace within and peace without today. To know the golden rule is to know one's abiding eternal roots in kindness. We were not born selfish, deceitful, competitive. No, we are born with Tao's great reservoir of humbleness. So there's a kindness essence at the root of Tao, a kindness that Tao initiates and De or virtue completes. Because Tao is always about promoting, if I can anthropomorphize just a bit. Tao promotes all things. All things. All things hinge together in a net, web, or fabric of interconnections. Remember, Tao creates all. And then De or virtue brings all to its completion, guiding us and them all to our right time, right place, right full purpose. Tao always promotes the good of the all, even when that promotion is out of sight, because Tao and virtue work in the deep background, often way out of sight, to promote the very processes and very basic conditions of our original instructions, where health, fulfillment, and completion of all things can get and do become actual real events. Tao's dream is made deed in us. So when one practices Tao and its benevolence to all, we are practicing a very proactive golden rule. We do not have to react to others in the same mood or manner that others act towards us. You know, that person who cuts you off or is just mean all the time. We don't have to lower ourselves to some temporary life-denying ethic where the only story is one of complaint or feeling wronged. The golden rule is active, like Tao. It takes the initiative of deeply rooted kindness in motion and action to others, in the same exact two-phase way as verse 54 teaches. So instead of saying in phase 1, like I mentioned earlier, where you root Tao within self, family, community, nation, and world as a practice of highest virtue, we now can say, rooting the golden rule within yourself, family, community, nation, and world sets us up for the fruit of all this rooting. That is, we now see others in ourselves. We regard others as ourselves. We regard other families through ours, other villages through ours, other nations through ours, and all below heaven as our most uncompromised and esteemed possessions. Because you are regarding them just right through the lens of yourself. This is the essence of the golden rule. Everything gets a promotion, as it were. Tao and golden rule helps a lot in our daily dealings with culture, which often would bend us the wrong way to accept a lesser thing, shallower roots, and short-sighted or myopic regardings one of another. One way we keep on having these tired concepts repeat themselves is to maintain culture's artificial lines of divisions, as if we are born to hate, born to disdain, born to complain, born to feel superior. How to erase these artificial lines? The golden rule does not teach do unto others before, not even as they do to you. The golden rule ever says it's always your turn. The deeply rooted person's initiative. Always do first, as you would be done by. It's always your move to make things different. Thus, we recognize our true roles as servants. Serve and serve and serve forever if it has to be, like forever. Not for reward, please, but because the universe, pardon my grammar, the universe just don't make sense if you do not serve. Taoism says in verse 8, we are to act like water, humanely irrigating the rough places of life, bringing moisture to dry places, serving as anonymous smoothers of tough places. This way, we may re-regard others and the artificial divisions between us. Maybe it means inviting that representative of another point of view to a meal, a coffee, a beer, without an agenda or preset determination in mind or heart. You just act humanely. Just listen. They may soften, or you may soften. No guarantees, but the golden rule means we don't have to repeat the idiocy of our pasts. What we do to the one or the single, we do to the all, including ourselves, not just in that time and place, but the effects reach the roots of our descendants, 99.9% of whom we shall never, ever meet. So what we do affects the weather or climate, not just in our part of the world, but like a butterfly effect, our doings echo everywhere. Tao initiates, De or virtue completes Tao's initiative, bringing all into a creative, interactive community, and together present us with a dynamic universe in which we are not just parts, but have parts to play. This is Tao initiating the golden rule. Knowing and then cultivating my roots in Tao, phase 1, and then phase 2, regarding the world as myself, I feel more enabled, more empowered to think less of myself and more of others. Ours is no time to shrink back, my friends, but to play forward in trust that what one does today will ripple through one's world and affect people you never know, see, or hear about, like neighbors on the other street or around the world, the natural world, like people or animals not yet born, but when they are, will benefit by something I intentionally do or something intentionally that I do not do today. Here's another way to look at it. We are who we are because of what has come before us, whether that heritage is love, hate, war, peace, whatever. We are the fruits of the events rooted in the past. But now, in good golden rule fashion, we may recognize how tides of history and culture and environment have lifted us all up. And it is a life full of privilege if one does nothing else but pay all this forward. Just pay forward the favors, the benefits, and privileges we have been afforded, so they do not end with us. So we do not lead lives of just bleeding out privilege and never use that power, that privilege for anyone else. Tao, in today's phases 1 and 2, enables, encourages, and initiates us gently to open our hearts and minds and hands to all, whether that all is alive, not yet alive, not alive now, or never alive. What we do or do not do today affects climate change, current wars, future hatreds, all of which will affect billions for decades to come. So cultivate our roots and then observe, our verse teaches, and regard all things as oneself. That's the golden rule. As I mentioned above, we are freed. We do not have to live as pale cartoons of others' designs, so find our natural roots in Tao. Cultivate our das, or virtues, sensibilities. The golden rule sets us free from our cultural habits and presets. We can, and are meant to live in wonder, in radical freedom, curious about everything. The Bhagavad Gita augments this by reminding us that rooted in the eternal, we are all sacred in every moment. All of us, every one of us, alive or not, we are divine. That Vedic scripture reads like this: one who is established in yoga practice is one with impartial vision everywhere, who sees one's God and oneself in all beings and oneself as God. So if you see the world, all things, even God as oneself, then whom can you harm as you bring out your treasures of Tao's fruits as the gifts they are to everyone? So stay rooted. Your practice of the golden rule is your very two-phased but yet moment-by-moment practice of Tao. Thank you, Floyd, and I hope I've answered your question. This podcast is an original work, designed, written, and produced by me. I also did the translations of Psalms 1 and Jeremiah 17 passages. Podwork artwork is by Audrey Davis. The Put Your Roots Down song is graciously provided by Molly Hartwell. Thank you. The copyright for quotations from Tao Te Ching is held by Fortress Press. May your days begin rooted in peace, so you may know moment by moment how to regard hope in every situation.